Hello all and welcome back to another Ozlex video. This is our second video after the wrap up of the Queensland election and the few marginal seat videos that we did there. So this is our first video covering the federal election that'll be happening next year, between March and May. And in this particular video, I'll just be going over some of the minor party contests for the federal elections, the best turnout and the best possible results for some of the minor parties, and how potentially the major parties could benefit on the decline that we're seeing in the minor parties. I suppose the um, Queensland election definitely saw a decline in minor party um, support. I don't know if it'll be a nationwide trend, but we'll see. We'll just have a look at how either party can benefit off a minor party best case scenario or worst case scenario, and how this would look for the next Parliament of Australia. So if we just first have a look at the Greens, just note that the map that I've got here does not take into consideration redistributions. So I know seats like North Sydney have been abolished, Higgins have been abolished, and then there'll be Bullwinkle in Perth. They haven't been taken into consideration in this map, as it's just the generic online one. Um, but they shouldn't impact too much. I know North Sydney would, because it is part of that teal wave that came across in 2022, but we'll calculate with it being there. So we'll start with the Greens. The Greens have had, I mean, it's been a disappointing result for them in the ACT and Queensland. I think best case scenario is that they retain those three seats there in Brisbane. I know they've been looking for Moreton there, just in Brisbane Central. I don't know what the chances of them winning Moreton are, so I think best case scenario for the Greens, Moreton would remain with Labor. I think in Melbourne, through redistribution, Hills becomes notionally, um, well, not notionally, but it becomes less Labor. So I suppose they would focus a lot of efforts on Hills in the hope of winning that. I know they did fairly well in the last election. It could be a possibility. I know they target the seat of Richmond a lot on the New South Wales coast there. I still don't know if that's within reach of the Greens. Adelaide is obviously another target seat for the Greens. I know in South Australia, I still don't see a world where they really do well outside of Melbourne and Brisbane. I think the Sydney seats that you could see a Greens presence, such as Grander and Sydney, are held by two high-profile Labor candidates for them to ever fall to the Greens. I know the Greens do well there. I just don't see it happening. So I see the Greens retaining what they have in South Brisbane as their best case scenario and winning in Melbourne and potentially Wills. I think the other one to look for will be Cooper, seeing if they can manage to win that or maybe prepare it for the next election. I know McNamara was close. I don't know if it'll be close again. But best case scenario in Melbourne, I can see them winning McNamara and Cooper. That is the best possible case scenario, I believe, for the 2025 election for the Greens. Um, in reality, I really find it hard um, to justify McNamara and Cooper for the Greens. I can see with the redistribution, the Wills becoming more of a Green seat. But yeah, likely scenario is those five seats there. But with the Brisbane City Council election and the state election just happened in Queensland, we even cast doubt over this South Brisbane result here. I think with the um, drift away from the Greens in Brisbane. I know it's still there. I know they've still got a presence, but reduced to one seat in the parliament. Um, Failed to go ahead of Labor in the Brisbane City Council mayoral election, despite their campaign there. I see a world where potentially Ryan um, returns to the LNP, and I see a world where Griffith or Brisbane could return to Labor. I think they'll maintain a presence. I believe it'll probably be in Griffith. So if I just go ahead and provide Brisbane to the Labor Party, this is probably a result we could see in Brisbane. We could see them retain two seats, probably Brisbane and Griffith. We could see them retain all three, Ryan, Griffith, and Brisbane. It just depends. What I would consider the worst case scenario for the Greens is probably that. So a reduction to two seats, which is just Brisbane and Melbourne. Worst case scenario, best case scenario there for the Greens. All right, so continuing on with these other seats, we'll now just cross over to I suppose Katter and Central Alliance. I don't see Central Alliance going anywhere. Central Alliance is for namesake only. Rebecca Sharkey is basically an independent. I've got Katter listed as an independent here. There could be an argument to see with the retirement of Warren Ench, a potential strong support for Katter in Leichhardt. I know in Cook they did all right. I know up there they've been progressing. However, I highly doubt um, that'll be the case. So I can see Bob Katter retaining his seat as we'd expect, potentially a win in Leichhardt, very slim chance, and then probably an increase in first preference in Herbert. So yeah, that's Centre Alliance and Rebecca Sharkey and Bob Katter who run minor parties. As for independents, I can see Andrew G retaining Kalair. I know the MRP had Andrew G behind by about 6%, and the Nationals moving to win Kalair. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It'll be hard to tell how that independent vote translates over, and if he's able to retain that margin. I can confidently say that Helen Haynes and Indi and Andrew Wilkie and Clark will be re-elected. But yeah, that'll be an interesting contest because he wasn't elected as an independent. It's hard to tell if there's much independent support in Kalair. Potentially the Voice, how the Kalair voted with the Voice, and if that'll translate to support for him. Fowler will also be an interesting seat. The MRP poll has it returning to the Labor Party, in which case we would see the Labor Party increase by 1 and the Independents go down by 1. That would improve their majority there. I don't know how that'll work, and I don't know if the MRP poll really properly accounts for independents. So I think it's quite hard to go off polling there unless it's seat-specific polling. And then, of course, there's the Teals, and they'll be a very interesting contest in the upcoming election. It's a big question of will the Teal wave continue? Will it halt but retain those seats, or will it die off completely? So, as we know, North Sydney is being abolished. So, where I can see a Teal potentially going is Bennelong and Bradfield in the absence of North Sydney. I know Kylie Ateek, the member for North Sydney, is likely to run in one of these two seats. I know there is a Teal candidate in Bradfield from the last election who's already declared herself the shadow member for the seat. So there's a chance that she'll run in Bennelong. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. As for the Teals in Victoria, the MRP poll had Kooyong returning to the Liberal Party, but Goldstein remaining with the Teals. That'll be interesting. Curtin is the Teals' most marginal seat in Perth there, so that'll be a very interesting contest to see how they are able to maintain that seat. Maybe if the grassroots potential member, if she's been really grassroots, she'll be able to retain that seat. If not, she'll likely lose it. So that's really the same with all the Teal seats. Unlike the major parties, those independents really have to be connected with the community for the community to re-elect them. They're not under a party. If the community's thought, oh, well, I'm voting for this party to form government, that's the benefit of members of other seats in major parties, not particularly independents. How that works, and if we'll see much of a contest in those Teal seats. So if we just go over, I suppose, the best case scenario for minor parties in general. This is best case scenario. I find it highly unlikely that this scenario will play out. But it's just a scenario, and it's just something to look at. So that'll increase the Greens to 7, another independent there for Katter in Leichhardt. And that's about as far as I can see independents and minor parties going. I don't see the UAP or any of those right-wing parties, for example, One Nation, doing well anywhere. I think in regional Queensland they'll increase their support potentially, but I don't see them ever winning a seat. Worst case scenario for the minor parties is where we could potentially see Rebecca Sharkey lose in Mayo. We could see Indi lost. That's a very worst case scenario. We could see Kalair lost. I could see Kooyong returning to the Liberals. I could see Curtin returning to the Liberals. McKellar, North Sydney, or what it is equivalent to be. Sorry, Sydney there's meant to be Labor. I've accidentally ticked this Teal. There. If we give Brisbane back, if we give Ryan, and then if we give those seats that I've just said in the best case scenario back to the Labour Party, that's the worst case scenario that I can consider for the Greens in the federal election and the minor parties altogether. And obviously we'll have the LNP elected in Leica. So yeah, what we get there is, we'll get Fowler returned for the time. So yeah, what we can see there is we'll retain Clark for the independent, and we see the Teals retain Goldstein, Sydney, and Bradfield. And I won't update those major parties, but that's where they return to. So yeah, worst case scenario, best case scenario. It'll definitely be interesting to see how that plays out. What is important to note is that it's incredibly difficult to predict minor party performance in elections, purely because they're not as recorded. So we don't have previous elections for some of these seats, particularly ones that are going to potentially go to a minor party. So overall, it's quite difficult to predict minor party performances. So those are really their gut feelings. They're looking at trends, for example, in the Brisbane City Council, the Queensland election. But there's no real hard proof statistical data to back up those best and worst case scenario predictions there. So yeah, that concludes this video here for minor parties in the upcoming federal election. If you'd like to follow more, I've got the Facebook that I'll link in the description, I've got the Twitter that I'll link in the description, and then the blog that's written version of all this in the description as well. So I highly appreciate it if you go follow those, subscribe to this, and check out in the blog every now and again. Other than that, that's my best and worst case scenarios and a little bit of analysis, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.